Hey all, this is my brief description and lecture of Chapter 9, Family Counseling with Individuals Diagnosed with Substance Use Disorders. This is an incredibly important chapter. This is critical to your work with individuals with addictive use disorders. No one exists alone. We just don't. Um, and so individuals with an addictive use disorder are no exception, and their development of supporting factors of and just sort of overall addictive use disorder um, certainly has an impact on or has been affected by their family. And so if you're a systems person, if your theoretical orientation is systems, you're really going to sort of get this chapter, and you're going to get where a lot of this discussion and concept is coming from. But essentially, when you look at a mental health issue or discomfort or concerns or traumas from a systems perspective, um, we can't divorce the individual or separate the individual from the family unit. We can't divorce or separate the mental health issue or concern from the family unit. We have to look at it uh, in its entirety and as a whole. Because again, no one gets to this point alone, and they don't stay at this point alone. And no one recovers alone and sustains whatever sort of level of moderation or abstinence that they want by themselves. Even those who don't have family members can still have an impact on others, whether it's family members, support systems, partners, or just even just friendships. The social relationships that we have, familial or otherwise, are important and critical for the work with addictive use disorders. So you'll find that as we sort of go through this chapter, and again, this is going to be sort of brief, but this is really important. Make sure you read the chapter. Make sure you go over these PowerPoints with my sort of lecture. And your assignment is based off of an intervention video that I posted. I want you to watch the entire thing. It's about two individuals, Terry, a lady named Terry, and a gentleman named Leon. And why I posted this video from intervention is because the family dynamic is so prevalent in these two videos and with these two individuals. And I don't know if intervention meant for it to be this way, but this is just a really good example of how um, much dysfunction can exist around and in a family when an individual has an addictive use disorder. And be mindful, I'm not saying that the individual with an addictive use disorder causes any dysfunction. And as you'll see as we go, it's oftentimes family members who help support family members or support system who help support the use, and can oftentimes even sort of inadvertently or unconsciously or covertly rather keep the individual sick. If an individual is sick and a family member sort of needs that to fulfill a role or a void, then it behooves the family member to have someone as an sort of an identified sick person or an identified need. Oftentimes you'll find people wanting to keep people sick to avoid real problems in their relationship or to sort of escape from having to deal with their own issues and concerns. So let's just sort of jump through these PowerPoints real quick. I thought this was the best way to do this so you can kind of see where I'm going. We're going to discuss the concept of homeostasis first. I'm not going to define the family, but know that when we talk about family, and we talk about it in terms of family and addictive use disorders and from a systems perspective, this does not mean a nuclear or biological family. This means uh, sort of any support system, any family chosen or otherwise, any family unit that is a hindrance or a healthy hindrance slash healthy support system for the individual with an addictive use disorder. So it doesn't matter if they are a blood relative or biological relative, but it can be anyone who the individual considers their family member. and we have to be mindful of this from a cultural perspective, and to be culturally competent. We can't just define family as maybe we see family as defined through your value system or your lens. You have to be mindful of the individual's chosen family and defined family. And so the best way to discuss this, best way to sort of address this, is by asking your client, who is your support system? Who is your family? Who do you identify as being a part of your unit, whether it's healthy or not? Um, so you can work on work within that system. So what's really important is that you look at the roles and the responsibilities within the family members. Again, overt rules, overt or covert rules. Overt roles and covert roles. What are the roles of each family member? What are the rules in each family? Do some of the rules help individuals to be oppressed or to be sort of less than other members of the family? And is this a contributing factor to why someone may have some discomfort or some traumas or whatever the situation may be? When we talk about boundaries, boundaries are really, really, really important. What we find, if you look at an individual who has an addictive use disorder, and you look at the system, you look at the family, and you look at boundaries, you'll find that those boundaries are either really, really, really inconsistent, and just not there, or they're really rigid and inflexible. Healthy boundaries are consistent and flexible. So when you look at unhealthy or dysfunctional boundaries, it's the opposite. Families attempt to maintain homeostasis, and that's really just stability. That's a word for stability. That's you see here in this PowerPoint, balance, structure, and again, stability. And this does not mean healthy. So you can see here it says not equivalent to healthy functioning. You can have incredibly unhealthy or dysfunctional consistency. The balance or stability and structure of your family can be dysfunctional, and that can be the norm. So your homeostasis does not mean, so when you think stability, that doesn't mean it's healthy stability. That's really important. And the other part that's really important for systems and working in a family is that every member of this family and support system has to sort of change together. It is naive and irresponsible and unethical for us to think that when you sit across from someone who has an addictive use disorder and they're looking for help from you, it's not naive for us to think that they can do this all on their own and without sort of bringing in their environment, their family, and discussing the changes that are necessary for the family. And what really happens is if the individual with an addictive use disorder changes and their family, again, I'm using that word family in the broad sense, but if the individual with an addictive use disorder wants to change and the family doesn't want to or cannot change, the individual either progresses on their own and leaves the family behind, or the individual regresses and goes back to that unhealthy homeostasis, or the best case scenario is that everyone progresses together in a positive way. I'm not going to talk too much about feedback loops, but feedback loops are the way that a family communicates, and that's through language or behaviors, but it's the way that a family communicates that establishes how the system is to function. Those can be positive and those can be negative, of course. We talked about that. The hallmark of addiction and the hallmark of addiction in family, of course, is denial. So denial is not just present in the individual with an addictive use disorder, but also present in the family. One or more family members may be denying that there's a problem, again, in an attempt to either sort of save face or an attempt to keep that unhealthy homeostasis or an attempt to navigate away from their own issues or their own problems. It would not be uncommon for a family member to have either, maybe let's say a mom and a dad have marital problems of their own, but if their son or daughter continues to have addictive use disorder issues and concerns, then they can avoid working on their marital and relationship issues. And that's just one example, of course, with different systems, different examples can be present. Maybe it's a partner who has their own sort of traumas and mental health issues that they want to avoid working on, so they hyper focus on the other partner's addictive use disorder. Those are just some examples. Other common characteristics would be shame. And a huge common characteristic or thread that exists in addictive use disorder families is their inability to express feelings. And that can be a result of quite a few different things. They were never shown how to express feelings in a healthy way. Expressing feelings were not welcome. Or if it's a family member where there's a very obvious history of severe addictive use disorders, then expressing your feelings wasn't safe, essentially because, as children, the individual who had as the child who had an addictive use disorder parent was always dealing with an unstable, inconsistent parent. So expressing feelings in that environment is never met with consistency. It's met with inconsistency, as you would imagine. You can see here the key to surviving in an alcoholic home is adaptation. They constantly have to be figuring out, who am I seeing today? Which parent am I seeing today? Which spouse or partner am I experiencing today? And I have to be on my toes to change, to adapt and navigate an environment of inconsistency. Let me see. Let's see. This is really important if you work in a school environment. You need to really read up on children in the substance use family. I kind of talked about that, the way they learn to adapt. But what we do know is that, overall, their developmental and cognitive sort of functioning can somewhat be off kilter, or even in some instances delayed. So you can kind of see here's some examples. Let's see. That's not all is lost, and I appreciate that, your textbook sort of included this piece. Not all is lost, and children are very pliable and resilient, and so as counselors, you have a great deal of impact and can have a great deal of effective work with children who have substance use in their family. Again, not all is lost. I want you to go over and talk about, or really sort of read into these roles. So responsible child, a pleaser, acting out child. Sometimes you'll hear a parentified child. Parentified child means the child took on parent roles when they should not have been. They should have been a child. Or a spouseified child, meaning that that the child took on a spouse-ish role with the other parent who does not have an addictive use disorder. Both of those are incredibly unhealthy, as you would imagine. And then you've got pleaser, acting out, adjuster, clown. These are just some roles that they don't, that they can sort of take on as a way of coping and managing their home environment. I think that's all. Sorry if I'm going too fast, but I skipped one piece here, and that's talking about scapegoats, and I thought that was in here. Hold on, I'm sorry. There's a section in your book, I believe, that talks about scapegoats, and I thought it was on here. I apologize I hope I'm not, I must have, shoot, I might have to include that later. But within a family, you're going to have sort of the rescuer, you're going to have a scapegoat, you're going to have, the sort of labeled person, and you're going to have the hero. So the hero rescues, the scapegoat's the one that sort of takes the blame, the clown, as with the children, they're the ones that sort of is never really serious. They just make lighthearted jokes, and, they don't take the situation very serious. And then I uploaded a victim, persecutor, rescuer triangle. And so essentially this is, again, sort of another systems perspective that looks at how individuals can fluctuate between a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor position. Look at that and read up on that. Okay,